Okay. Hello.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good.
What's your name?
Farhana. Just
Farhana.
the first name, is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Farhana.
Good to meet you, Farhana. Where are you from?
Well, right now I'm from Oakland, California. I live here. I've been living here for a while now. It feels like maybe 15, no, more than that, 17 years maybe?
17 years. So you didn't grow up out here?
No.
Where did you grow up?
In various places, right? Like all over. I would say primarily, it feels like to me when I think about where I grew up, I usually answer Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Although I lived there less, now that I think about it, than I have in California. But that's, formative years were in Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Where did you go to high school?
So there's a town on the southwest corner of Michigan called Niles.
Mm-hmm.
It's a couple hours from Chicago and maybe an hour from the border of Indiana. And that's where I went to high school, Niles High School. There's only one there.
One, so small town.
Small town.
Mm-hmm. Were you born in Niles?
No. You want to know where I was born?
Mm-hmm.
In India. But my family migrated when I was 3.
3 years old. Mm-hmm. So you don't really have any memories of it?
I actually have quite a few memories, but they're the memories of what a 3-year-old would have.
Uh-huh. What do you remember?
It's not a continuous memory. I think as an adult you remember things continuously.
Mm-hmm.
As a kid you just remember like moments, right? So there's a lot of moments that I remember. Dreams that I had, or driving in a car, going to a movie, driving on a scooter with my parents.
Oh, cool.
Things like that.
Uh-huh. What was high school like for you? When you look back on it, do you feel like fondly for it? Do you feel like it was, I guess high school is frustrating for everybody, but.
Yeah, it was awful. I guess it's the same story. I'm not sure. My experience, it was awful because, it was just uncontrolled. Like you have a group of kids who are between, 14 and 17 or 18. They're all about themselves, right? And there's very little compassion or understanding, I guess, that's built out in that environment, and very little oversight, actually. Like the teachers don't really, at that time anyway, they didn't really have any oversight as far as like behavior. Mm-hmm. So you had this group of kids running sort of amok, emotionally. And if you weren't in a place where you felt like, what you were going through was recognized, then it sucks, right? It feels like you're in a place where your decisions are being watched over, and your support system are people of your own age, basically, right? Mm-hmm. So there's no like more experienced person with better perspective helping you through whatever it is that you're going through. Mm-hmm. It's just your peers, and they don't really give good advice.
Yeah. So
yeah, it's a horrible situation. I think high school's different now. At least the high schools I've seen are quite different now.
Was it a kind of a situation where it was just like couldn't wait to get out kind of thing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like from the minute I got there.
Did you go to college?
I did. I went to college in Michigan. Mm-hmm. There's not like there was any oversight there either, but somehow the part about high school, so high school was awful for multiple reasons. What I explained, I think, was just one, but also because high school is very hierarchical. Mm-hmm. There are factions, and some factions are more powerful than others, And if you're in one that's not inclusive, and if you're one that doesn't get attention or doesn't get recognized, right, then you're sort of the bottom of the heap. College, depending on which one you go to, I think depending how big it is, kind of blows that up. So at least that aspect of it is changed, right? You don't have those sort of social barriers. You know, you can cross barriers. You don't have to be in a box or labeled or have a reputation. So at least that goes away.
What did you study in college?
I studied economics and I studied psychology, both.
Oh, cool. What was something that you studied in economics was there anything like a book or an idea or anything that you felt like was like, just like really blew your mind, like made you maybe see the world a little bit differently?
I think, I think, was it Galbraith? It was the theory of like, exuberance, where a commodity, because of the, I guess the consumer want for something, a commodity can become overpriced, and you have a spike in what that commodity's worth. So you'll have something in particular that will drive an economy for people to think this particular thing will never lose value because it's just so popular, everybody wants it, they're willing to pay extra for it. And
like an iPhone or something.
Like an iPhone. I think the example I think that I learned about then was tulips. Like there was a period of time.
The thing in that was in the Netherlands?
I think so, yeah. Where they were a huge exporter of tulips all across Europe, and people just would do anything to get one of these tulips. So the popularity of tulips was driving an inflated value of the actual commodity, which is the flower. So there was an idea that if you just invested forever into the tulip, that you would always have a dividend that was going up and up and up all the time. So there's really like inflated value of this thing. But then eventually, for whatever reason, sometimes it's a factor you can't really necessarily predict, right? There's a crash in that thing. And the wealth that people think that they built up based on their investment into this commodity loses all its value. And then depending on how pervasive that is, right, all across a society, the crash can be pretty intense for some people, the whole entire society, or multiple societies if they're all interconnected, right?
So like the housing
estate.
crisis.
That's
yeah,
exactly right. So you see this unfettered exuberance happening. I mean, that was like, I don't even know, ages ago, right? And you see it happening over and over and over and over again, right? And it happens to just a lot of extremes today. It happened in the stock market crash. And even with the safety nets that were put into place to prevent these types of crashes, it still happens anyway. So, I mean, I think it's interesting to know that anything that you're getting too caught up into will have its like ups and downs, but yet you find yourself caught up into it anyway, right? It really says something about people and how they drive an economy. So
yeah, it's like almost like a feeding frenzy or something. That we have this habit, something with humans. Yeah,
and it never goes away. It seems like there's always like this crash and this bust. So to be conservative, right, and to ride out those waves, right? That was the other thing too, is riding out the waves of the ups and downs, but being conservative and knowing that anything that's rising will never be in that place forever, right? But also just like, I think the other thing about economics that was cool was the price setting, right? Demand and supply and how it sets price. That was an interesting part of economics. Money supply too, that was really cool. And that was macroeconomics, money supply, how that controls the stability of the society. That was cool. Yeah, I thought it was really cool. Studying that was great.
Yeah, and then how interesting. So then your education was kind of a mixture of both with psychology and economics?
Oh, right. So I never had an aptitude for economics, right? Like I'm talking about it now because it was interesting, but not because I was any good at it, right? I was pretty awful at it. And when it got like more challenging, when you got into the higher economics, right? I was like, this is so not for me. I mean, I don't know who likes economics. I'm not sure what kind of like who tends to fall into that and really enjoy it. But it's almost like math. Like you might be fine in algebra and geometry, but then you get into like the more harder math and all of a sudden you're like, you've hit the wall, you know?
Ah, yes.
And you're like, oh, I thought I really liked this, but I'm way over my head. That's what it felt like. But that never happened with psychology. It was very, as it progressed and it got more difficult, it was actually something that I liked more and more and more. And it wasn't more challenging to the point where I couldn't understand it anymore. With each like thing that got more challenging, the more interesting it was. So anyway, that was more my thing, more my style.
More psychology.
Yeah.
What do you do now?
Oh, I'm in risk management in a financial institution. So I don't do any of that right now. So.
Let's see. Do you feel like do you like your job?
There are aspects of my job that I really like, and then there are aspects of my job that are really, really challenging. So it's both.
Let's see. What was your favorite job?
So I did this, it wasn't even a job. It was a volunteer gig that I had when I was traveling, where I was working in a school for kids that were about to go into like kindergarten. So they were younger than that. I think they were like 4, maybe 5. And I was basically hanging out with them, and applying, I don't know, just some education with them, not too much. But I think that was really satisfying. It was really fun.
What was your least favorite job?
Oh, sales, right. So right out of college, right? In college, I was a teller in a bank, right? That was really fun, actually. Not very interesting, but fun, just because of the people that I worked with. But I needed a job, after I graduated. So usually when you walk into a bank, right, you've got the teller, the people who are handling the transactions, and then you've got the people who are doing sales, right? They're trying to sell checking accounts and credit cards and bank products, right? So I went into that only because I was already working in the bank, right? And I graduated, and that was actually a full-time job, versus like being a teller is flexible while you're in school. There's a lot of students who are tellers. So going into sales, I don't remember how many years I did that. Not many, but it was awful. I hated it. I hated every day of it. Because you're trying to sell something to someone. You're not,
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And a lot of times things that they could be fine living without.
I mean, I think most things are pretty useless, right? Like to try and convince somebody or to try and get somebody to buy something that I feel is kind of not really that valuable. I mean, it's hard to put your heart into it, right? Because it seems like, why am I doing this?
Yeah. What TV shows did you like when you were a kid?
I remember I think it was 6th grade, Tuesday night was my favorite night because it was Shauna Na at 7:30, and then 8 o'clock was Happy Days. 8:30 was Laverne and Shirley. Is that right? And then 9 o'clock was The Ropers. So I think that was like the fun night for me as a kid. I don't remember what I was watching as a high schooler. Much more movies, I think, than TV.
Do you have a favorite movie?
Oh, no. I like movies. I watch a lot of movies. So no, it would be hard to narrow down a favorite.
Do you have any that you watch or have watched over and over? Did you ever go through I feel like when I was younger especially, I would have certain movies and I would just watch them over and over.
Like what movies?
Oh, when I was very young, definitely like Indiana Jones, and I like
Sure.
Star Wars, of course. And I would just watch them over and over and over. And then as I got older, I really liked, I really like Martin Scorsese movies. Like I really
Sure.
like stuff about gangsters,
Right.
and I used to watch those with like Robert De Niro and stuff. I would watch those over and over. Yeah, so I guess stuff like that.
Right. No, I didn't watch movies over and over. I think the only movie, and this is as an adult, like a full blown adult with kids. The only movies that I saw more than a couple of times was like the Twilight series, right?
Oh yeah.
Right. Because I had a massive crush on Robert Pattinson. I have children, I had a family, but somehow those movies were very compelling. I think that's it. I might have seen them like more than a couple of times. Oh, so I know what movie I've seen many times, but not of my own choosing, is Ace Ventura, Pet Detective.
Oh yeah.
My kids love that movie, so we watch it often because they love it. And they also like Naked Gun. I think my older one likes Naked Gun. My
yeah.
younger one likes Ace Ventura. So
Kind
those
of
have
like
been watched.
slapstick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that humor. And so we've seen it many times, both of those. But that, like I said, I wouldn't do that by choice. They're funny, don't get me wrong. I love them.
Oh yeah.
But I don't know
totally.
about watching them like,
I used to like those a lot too when I was
20
a kid.
times. You know?
I used to even watch that old movie Airplane.
Yeah, Airplane's okay.
Kind of similar.
Yeah. There's a few lines in Airplane that I pull out
Yeah.
when I need to. And they always bring the house down. They're just funny.
How many? So you do have children?
Yeah, I have 2 daughters.
2 daughters. And how long have you been married? That's sort of an assumption that I made.
No, I know. No, I am married. God, for the life of me, I don't know. It's either 17 years or 8. I know it's not 15. I know it's not 20, but it's something in the middle. It feels like it's 17 or 18. It's probably, I don't know, it's one of those two.
Did you meet your husband in the Bay Area or in the Midwest?
Yeah, in the Bay Area.
What brought you to the Bay Area?
Oh, right. So when I was a senior in college, my dad got a job in Palo Alto. So the family moved. My dad, my mom, my sister, who was much younger than me, she was still in middle school at the time. They moved to Palo Alto. And in my senior year of college, I came out during spring break to visit them. And we went to San Francisco, wherever, and I had come from Michigan. It was March, and then we were here. It wasn't raining that week, and the weather was it was one of those unseasonably really nice weeks in San Francisco. Maybe it was April. But I remember thinking, like, okay, this is nice. I don't think there's much choice but to move out here after I'm done. So that's what happened. I graduated college and just moved out.
Like fell in love with it?
Oh, like instantaneously.
Yeah.
I remember driving over the bridge and thinking like, oh, okay, I get it. This is it.
Yeah.
Like driving 80 across the country and then, going, I didn't know at the time that I was driving through like, like Richmond and like El Cerrito or whatever.
Yeah.
And then coming through, I guess, Emeryville and then going over the bridge and then being like, wow, this is nice. And then just liking it more and more and more every day,
Yeah. So, people talk so much about how much the city and the region has changed.
Sure.
Even just like in the last 10 years, would you say? Do you feel like you still have that love for the Bay Area, or do you feel like it's a different place that maybe you don't recognize in the same way?
No, I still love it. Whenever I can get to the city, which, well, I do go every day for work. I mean, that's not really hanging out in the city though, really, right? But I know. I mean, I get it. I understand the changes that have happened as a result of technology. I think has really driven some of the changes, and some of them are not fortunate. But I don't know. I was hanging out there not that long ago, in the evening, and I was looking up things to do. I had a friend in from out of town, and I was looking up things to do, and we came up with a plan pretty quickly. And I was I was walking around in certain parts of the city, and I just loved it. I mean, I was like, this is it. I mean, No, I haven't. That love for the city and the passion for the city has not diminished.
That's awesome.
Because it was more than just. I think the things that people gripe about, or things that have happened that are unfortunate, is because of the wealth that's come into the city and the sheer population, right? It's made things more cluttered. It's brought up more construction that's forced out people out of housing that have been there. It's made it less affordable. All of that is true. But the reason why I love the city was because it was a city. It was bustling, and it had a lot of stuff to do, and it had a vibrancy about it. And to me, even with all of those things that have changed, that essence of a city is still there. I mean, I feel like that too when I go to other cities as well. So, but it's warm. It's not like Chicago,
Yeah.
It's just freezing, and it's not sprawling like a lot of cities are.
Yeah.
Right? So the stuff that I loved about it have been maintained. That hasn't changed.
Let's see. Could you see yourself living in another city? Like maybe after your children were to go to college or something like that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, I think I'm so used to the city. I still do love Chicago, though. It's just that it's cold there now in the winter. I like Los Angeles, parts of it. Some of the cities that I've been to in Europe are so amazing. I love them, too. Yeah, I mean, I could see myself living elsewhere in Europe or even in Asia or just other, very other cities in America. Oh, Toronto. That's another one. That's pretty great. I like that city.
I hear a lot about Toronto. It seems really nice. Do you feel like having children has changed your life a lot or not a lot versus like when you think about the person that you were before you had children?
Yeah, it completely changed everything. Absolutely everything. There might be elements to the person before there, but not. I mean, it was defining. I think it was so it was such a huge thing. It kind of changes your personality and your I don't know, your like even your chemical makeup. It's a huge thing. I do remember pieces of who I was before, but I don't remember being I don't remember. I don't have parts of me now that I remember being that way prior to the kids. I don't know if that made sense.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a younger sister, and that's it.
Does she live nearby you?
She lives in Palo Alto, so she
Oh,
never
cool.
moved. When my family moved out here, she stayed.
Do you guys have a good relationship?
Yeah, we do. We're really close.
So kind of back to the previous question, do you feel like your relationship changed after you had children, or was it always like a strong relationship, or did it?
Oh, with my sister? No, my relationship changed with her while I was in college, I think, and it has been consistent since that time.
Let's see. What do you like to do in your spare time?
Yeah, there's no spare time. Like at all. I can't think. This is my spare time right here, right? No, I mean, it's a busy life, right? It's working. It's taking care of the kids. And that's it, really. I mean, there are moments, right, where I think I have plans with some friends, some old friends that I've had forever this weekend. But even that's purposeful. I mean, it's the holidays. We're trying to help one friend out, But there's a lot of things I would like to do. I just think I'll get to it eventually, you know?
What kind of things?
I mean, I love the stuff that the city has to offer, right? Like all of the, everything from cultural things, volunteering, civic-minded type of things, political things. I mean, all of it, I guess, okay, so when I ask that question to people that work for me, they'll usually say things like spending time with kids, reading, traveling, and so that's what my answer would be, right? Because I do that stuff because it's part of my life, but there are other things that I would do if I had more freedom. So what I do in my spare time is what I just told you.
Mm-hmm. What's something that you've done that you're most proud of?
I think okay, I can think of one thing. So I think experiences that you have when you're growing up, right, your formative years, they become so much a part of your fabric and your network of who you are that you don't always even know, right? There's a lot of like subtleties, right, in how you perceive yourself and how you perceive the world, and a lot of it is just because it's what you were used to. To recognize those things and then to make conscious decisions about, well, is that really what I think is the right thing to do or how I want to be? When my kids were born, I made that decision to say, I'm going to try and look at that as objectively as I can and unravel some of it so that I can actually be really, really present for the kids and not have my decisions based on, well, that's how I grew up or that's what I'm used to, or just something that's more habit than it is a conscientious thing. So I think that's it. It's just really trying hard to take a look at whatever's happening at the moment. Like, why am I being triggered? Why am I feeling a certain way? Why am I making this decision? And then maybe adjusting it based on what's really actually right for the children, as opposed to maybe I'm infusing some of my own stuff in there, which is really hard to not do, because you're just being you, right? You're just doing what you think based on your experiences, right? You're not stepping outside of yourself and your comfort zone to say, well, what about what it is that they want, So I would say that it's just that dedication to being as mindful as I can to them is probably what I'm most proud of. I hope it pays off, right? Like, I guess I see how they are with me. I see the way in which that they express themselves, and I think it's going okay. But I'm not certain, right? So it's to be seen.
What kind of things do they do that make you feel that way, where you're like, oh, it's like, it seems like I'm doing a good job, like they seem like good kids, like I feel proud of something that they said or did or something?
Right. Well, one is the affection that they show, right? Like the respect and the affection. It's not that they don't have their moments, right? I mean, like we all do, right? They're not always respectful, or they're not always making a decision that's compassionate. It is all about them. They don't yet have experience to be able to step outside of themselves and think about things that are outside of their own, their own perception. But I mean, when I see them being really kind and really compassionate towards others or animals or the world, when I hear them talking about politics, right, like in their own way. I'm trying to think of something that Ava said recently that just floored me. Well, she was really turned off by the whole wall, right? Like the putting up a wall between us and another country. And the way she articulated it was really great, She kind of had this this thing about, well, the land isn't owned by anybody. How can you wall off something that's not even yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a lot more philosophical, but just things like that, like the way that they are when it comes to their compassion, but it's also the way they are with me too, in that they are, oh, is it just shut off?
Yeah, that was the 30 minutes. Yeah. But you can finish that thought.
They're just so, even in their moments where they're not respectful at that moment, they course correct. They'll come back around and say, I'm sorry. They'll have an introspection about what they did that may or may not be as respectful as it could be. And they often will come back and say, I'm really sorry that I was acted that way, or I did that. Or they're just, I don't know, they're just so mindful. And I don't know, I think, I'm not sure why they're like that, but that's what leads me to think that maybe with me being as mindful as I can, that maybe I am leading by some example,
Mm-hmm.
So.
Cool. Okay, so that's us halfway through. Do you want water or anything? You want to keep going?
Oh, I'm good. Yeah, I just wanted to see who called.
Okay.
If that was important. Oops, I dropped a
oh, there's my eraser.
Eraser. I don't want them to chew it. Okay.
Okay. So then this next part is just silent.
Right.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Okay, that's 3 minutes. Let's see. When you were growing up, were you raised with a certain political outlook?
No, my parents weren't really politically minded. I think they're more so now.
Mm-hmm.
They really weren't politically minded then. Michigan is it's a Democratic state. Okay, I'll take that back. So prior to moving to Michigan, my parents actually migrated to Canada from India. So from the time that I was 3 to 10, they mentioned things that I didn't realize were, things that were, they ended up mentioning things that in the end are political in nature without me even knowing it. Like, for example, everyone has healthcare, right, in Canada. So that was talked about a lot, especially because my dad's in the healthcare industry.
Mm-hmm.
That was talked about a lot, about how everybody gets healthcare and how critical that is. It's important because obviously in India, not everybody has healthcare. Nobody does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a very impactful thing. And the other thing, too, were some of the common rights that people in Canada had, right? So, the amount of money that went into education, for example, right? Not just healthcare, but education. That there was pressure to have less disparity of income, right? There's more equality. And then the gun laws, right? That there was no one's allowed to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except the militia or the military. I mean, the police force, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was talked about, but not in the context of politics, right? It wasn't really, because I think the parties at that time in Canada, and when my parents became citizens, they were voting more. It was like liberal and then really liberal,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there wasn't seen as being. Looking back now, I see how liberal it was, right? Or how I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Here people would call that more socialist, right? But really, it was just it's very colonial, I think. So it wasn't until I moved to Michigan that those types of things that were second nature to me became something that was different and therefore more politicized, right? So it was sort of an inadvertent political viewpoint that I was growing up with. So it's not like they even talked about different parties or what you should believe or your value system is. They had adopted the value system of Canada, right? Which is, just a lot less capitalistic, right? A lot less corporate, and that ended up assuming my sort of viewpoint on how society takes care of its people.
Mm-hmm. Were you raised religious?
No. I really give my mom credit for this. So she's very religious, very, very, very religious, and she wanted that for me and my sister. And luckily, my dad is not religious at all, like not even a little bit. He's completely void of religion in his life. So there was such a big difference between the two of them that I actually had a choice as to what I wanted to do. So when I made the decision that I was going to be more like my dad and not adopt a religion, I knew she was disappointed, but she didn't force me to be more religious. So she did her thing. My dad did his thing, and then we all kind of did our own thing. Mm-hmm. So I had some exposure, but I wouldn't say I was raised in a religious way.
Do you still feel the same? Like, do you have a religion that you claim now, or are pretty agnostic, would you say?
Oh, more than agnostic, but
Atheist.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
What do you think happens when people die?
I think you just die. You're dead.
It's like a cease of consciousness, and then it's over.
Yeah, I think whatever we're comprised of, whatever we're made of, decomposes. And maybe some of that, I don't know, energy, that life energy gets absorbed in whatever way you die. But I don't think that there's a higher consciousness that floats up somewhere and maintains itself.
Let's see. What is something that you would like to see or do before you die?
I'd like to see my kids go to college. I mean, it'd be great to travel more. I feel like I've traveled, not a tremendous amount, but I've traveled some, lived in certain places. It'd be nice to live in other countries. Okay, I know. It would be nice to do something really humanitarian. I was watching this documentary not too long ago about the lions in Botswana and how they're going extinct, and that there's efforts, right, to save the lions, and what people give up their whole lives for certain animals that are going extinct, or just bettering, an area that really needs some attention. It'd be really great to do something that's humanitarian. When I watch documentaries about, or news stories about doctors who were born here, but they're Syrian by, the parents are Syrian, and they've committed their lives to help people in Syria. I mean, there's a tug there that's like, whoa, that's amazing that you're in this war-torn country and you're trying your best to help people not be in a place where they're suffering, And they're doing it like for free, I mean, that type of humanitarian thing it'd be cool to do one thing like that at least.
Yeah. Do you feel that the world is in a generally good place or a generally bad place right now?
I mean, it's really hard to say, right? Like when you hear about that as you grow older and you get less idealistic because you have more experiences and you see, right, that you have this perception that the world is worse than it was. But really, when you look at like, I don't know, human civilization, right, for the thousands of years, I mean, there's statistics that show us that we're actually in this like much better place than we may have been before. Like the amount of people who get educated, the amount of people who don't die from horrible, like, like deaths where they can get treated medically. And, the idea that we have communication and transportation, and supposedly we're in a much better space now as humans than we have been. I don't know so it's really hard to say, right? It's hard to know whether it's getting better or worse. I think it just depends on your perspective.
What's something that maybe gives you hope about the United States?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's very imperialistic in a lot of ways. So that's the other thing about economics, right? That you learn about imperialistic societies and how they have to fall to get to other places, and they sometimes they downsize, they get smaller. I mean, from Rome to England, other places, right? And America's struggling. I think I don't know what it would take for it to be better right now. I mean, I hear about, like, just today I heard this story about how technology is driving more capitalism, more imperialism, more disparity of income, and how just there's a few people that are really, really, really wealthy and they hold up the power. For that to change, I mean, when you look back historically on situations where that was there, like when there was a monarchy, or the society had to collapse in order for it to rebuild, right? So I don't know. I don't really have a hope other than the fact that maybe it'll collapse and it can get restructured. But the only hope that I saw was that I hear people talking about that when Trump was elected, there was sort of a kick in the pants. Like everybody was so shocked that it could actually happen. And maybe it means that more civic involvement has to happen now for that like runaway freight train not to happen again. So that's kind of a hopeful thing, right? But
Yeah, so something that's equally as shocking that people never thought could happen, but something that I don't know. I mean, maybe like universal health care, like what they have in Canada or something. It seems like that could never happen, but I mean, if Trump can get elected, like why couldn't that happen?
Maybe. I mean, it's more in the context of people getting disenfranchised, right? Like when the group of people who were not a minority felt so disenfranchised for years and years and years, it brought about this change, right? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you hear about the Democrats saying, if we had been paying attention to the majority white people, white men who may or may not have been educated, if we had been paying attention to that demographic, this Trump thing might not have happened, right? So, I don't know. It's that type of hope that, you know, when something horrible happens in your life and you're like, oh, maybe I need to turn myself around a little bit because this is terrible. Like it's like a wake-up call, right?
Yeah.
You get diagnosed with a terminal disease or,
sure,
I don't know, just something, right, happens that's just so transcending that you say, I need to make a change. I hear people talking about that in a way that I hadn't heard before, like getting more active in politics, you know, getting more preventive so this type of thing doesn't happen again, seeing where the trouble spots are earlier and taking care of them, stuff like that. That's hopeful.
Yeah, I think so.
But these humongous conglomerates that hold all the power, right? I actually have very little hope that they could ever really be more for the people, right? Instead of just like, you know, a small
for the
handful.
Shareholders.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or a small handful of really, really wealthy people.
Yeah.
And that their decisions that they make are not driven by profits versus driven by what's right for people. You know?
Are you familiar with the 7 deadly sins?
Yes.
Which of the 7 deadly sins do you think is most harmful to society?
Oh. Isn't that gluttony is one of them?
Mm-hmm.
Sloth.
Gluttony, sloth, lust, wrath, envy, pride,
I mean, all, right? Every single one of them to a degree, right, can be destructive. So it's hard to categorize one. I don't know why I thought about gluttony. I think maybe because there's such a huge health crisis right now in this country. I mean, all the way from like, you know, drug addiction to just obesity and diabetes, right? Like everything that we're consuming as a society is like killing us from the inside out. Like that, like making really terrible choices in our food and our intake, right? Because that's what's available, right? That again, you're back to the food industry and the farming industry and the pharmaceutical industry that are all in cahoots, and they pump out this like toxic waste that we consume. You know,
what do you think that's motivated by?
Oh, greed, right? So is that one of them? Maybe it's that. Yeah. But then at the same time, the reason why the consumers are, they don't, I know the choices are limited, so I get that, but consumerism can change, right? We can opt not to buy into the limited choices. So that's kind of sloth-like.
Because the people have personal choice.
Yeah. Isn't that gluttony and sloth in a way, in that you're being really passive about, you know?
People just kind of like accept what's given to them, I suppose. Yeah, I guess that could be sloth, rather than, I guess, demanding or working that things be different.
Or just choosing differently, right?
Yeah.
Where you're buying, you have a plant, we tried this and it's really hard. Plant-based, whole foods farmers market, right? Like local growers, right? It's really tough to live like that. I think if you're not working, right, and you can like spend an entire day living a more sustainable life. I don't know if there is sustainable anymore, but a more sustainable life, right? It takes a lot of time and energy, right? So you could choose that. It's just difficult to figure out ways to do that when you have got other demands, you know. It's much easier to buy a prepackaged meal.
What was that like to how long did you do it for, where it was all whole foods, plant-based?
I mean, we were still doing it, right? I think my daughter, my 10-year-old, so here we go, right? My 10-year-old and I saw a few documentaries, right? And she was like, that's it. We got to change our lifestyle, right? So I was like, okay, all right, I can do this. So we went through recipes together and we bought, you know, what we need to buy. They were all awful. They were all horrible tasting because we're just not used to eating that way, right? But we tried, and then we keep trying. So like about once a week, I'll show her. So I have this website that produces like recipes, and I'll show them to her. And I'm like, okay, should we try this one? Okay, so we go buy the ingredients, make it. It's awful, right? But
no.
Yeah, they all taste terrible because we're just not used to no sodium and very little fat in the diet and having it all be plant-based. But anyway, we're trying, though. And I think we'll figure out something, but it's not happening quickly.
Would you guys make the meals together?
Yeah, we have been.
That's really nice. So do you feel like even that, maybe the food doesn't taste that great, but do you feel like you guys like bond over that?
Oh, yeah, very much. And just the way that we talk about it, right? And the struggles that we have. She's like, Mommy, I know plant-based. I mean, and they say plant-based whole foods. They won't say vegan because that has such a bad connotation to it, right? So I know plant-based is really a healthy thing. All the evidence shows, right, what happens to, you know, your body when you go that route is the way to go. But I just think, I think the best I can do is be vegetarian. So it's really funny to see her like really grappling with this. And she's like, maybe later I can figure out, because we went through this whole thing with milk, right? Like all these different milk substitutes, and she hated every single one. She's like, okay, but maybe did you like milk when you were a kid? And I'm like, yeah, I did, but I don't like it now. So it's no problem for me to give it up, right? So she said, well, maybe when I get older and, you know, my palate changes, right? So she's very, very conscientious about those things. And I really like her thoughtfulness, you know? Mm-hmm.
Does she talk about, at that age, are they already thinking about like what they want to do in the world? Like when they go to college or after college and stuff like that?
I don't think so. I mean, not in my experience anyway. And I've always shied away from that because that was so pervasive when I was growing up, right? There was constantly being asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, right?
All these like plans way ahead.
These plans. And I think so there has been you know, you look back in history on these sort of golden ages that have happened, right? Whether it was art or, I don't know, cuisine, you know, whatever, right? There has been a major overhaul in technology in the last, in our lifetime, right? Nobody knew when I was growing up that programmers and, so I'm in risk management, right? So there's a whole industry on data security, right? Info security. And nobody knew back then that there would ever be this type of demand for engineers, for technology types of jobs, right? So you couldn't say back then and this was just not that long ago, right? Just a few decades ago, you wouldn't say like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right? You want to be a doctor or a lawyer. Oh, do you want to be a information specialist? Or do you want to be a big data analyst? No, I mean, no one said those words, you know? So I think it's a little bit short-sighted to be able to even bring that into the vernacular. I don't have any idea in 2 decades when they're in the workforce what the need is going to be at that time. Yeah. So it seems a little ridiculous to be able to say to them, what do you want to be? So as a result of me like making that an absent thing in the conversation, I never ask. It's just, let's see what the world offers at that time, right? What the demand is, what the need is, you know? So no, they never talk about it either, which is good. What does seem to happen a lot though in like parent circles and communities is this idea of, what is the kid's strength? Like, what is it that drives them? What makes them tick, right? So, there's a lot of talk about, well, is it like, it's usually subject-based, right? Is it math, science, art? Is it, it's science, technology, engineering, math, and art, right? STEAM. That's like huge in education. So it's more about what does the makeup of the child gravitate toward is more about that conversation comes up more. So you're saying to yourself, well, my kid really, really, really enjoys drama, right? They're in drama or they're in music or they're in art, and they're also very strong in humanities. Maybe they're also somewhat smart in technology as well. There's definitely some crackerjacks, right, that are in one of my daughter's classes that have that sort of broad talent all the way across the board. So there's more talk about how do you utilize all those skills in order for them to create maybe a new industry, or maybe, there's a lot of talk of entrepreneurship and I don't know. I think a lot of parents have this mindset that it's like anything can happen, right? Innovation is huge right now. So,
who even knows?
Who knows, right? Putting your kid's skill set into something innovative could be something that we don't know is around the corner for them. So yeah, I think it's that. I think it's that combination of, it's just not in the vernacular that the kids even say to themselves, I'm pigeonholing myself into this industry, when it's really about their skill sets.
So it's STEAM, so science, technology,
engineering, and art and math. Did you say math? Yeah, right. So you look at the iPhone, for example, right? The iPhone is all of that together, and the artisticness of it is just, it's a sublime piece of technology. Yeah. I mean, really, it's so artistic and in and of its own right, So, that's just one example of innovation at its best,
Which of those categories, like when you were in high school, which one did you feel like you were most?
Probably math and science.
What about your sister?
I guess, so she's a teacher, and she works in a nonprofit right now. I think she's always sort of gravitated towards those things, the more humanities and education.
What about your daughters?
I don't know. I mean, really, it's to be seen, right? Ava is good at everything. I mean, she does not struggle, and she excels, right? So who knows? But her heart is humongous. Like, she's the one who talks about large corporations being evil, and how she gets this cycle of. I think it comes up a lot because we talk about food a lot, right? But she gets the cycle of that the food industries are subsidized, and they can't be in business because they actually are not sustainable. They're subsidized, and they make really unhealthy foods that keep us hooked and addicted, and we eat those foods, and they stay in business. And the pharmaceutical companies stay in business because they make medication that we rely upon, even though we're unhealthy, right? So she gets there's all these links to things. So I have no idea. I mean, she's sort of outraged by all of it, and part of her wanting to do this plant-based thing was to buck the system, and do something that was radical, so that she wasn't buying into the big machine. So she has this and then she's an animal lover. She's real, and she was the one who saw that documentary about saving the lions in Botswana, right? So this is really sort of rebellious kind of compassion. So I don't know. I have no idea. I could see her working in public policy. I don't know. Human rights.
Maybe law or something.
Maybe.
People that change the laws for the better.
Yeah. I'm not sure. And Maya's very artistic. She draws. I don't know. I'm always blown away by her artwork. She's really an incredible artist, and I don't know. So we'll see. But she's good at other subjects too, right? It's just she has this thing about English and writing. She's a really good writer. I mean, when I think about like the accolades that she gets from her teachers, it's all about writing and art. So we'll see.
Pretty much, it's gonna cut out in a moment.
Okay.
The last question I always ask people is, what advice would you give to future Americans?
Oh. I'd be more like Sweden. I think. I'm not sure. There's some issues in Sweden too. There's some radicalism there as well, but I don't know.
Like how?
Well, that one guy, right? Like the
Oh, I mean, like how should Americans, like, in what way, like what model should they adopt that maybe the Swedes do?
I mean, the disparity of income is a lot lower, right? There's a lot more equality across the society, a lot more economic fairness, right? So
Universal health care.
there's that, but just also the you don't have the uber rich that are controlling everything,
Yeah.
right? There's more services for people. There's more just chances for and education is the other thing too, like the importance in education. And teachers, just even at an elementary school level, have their PhDs in education as opposed to emergency teaching credentials, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, that cut out. Cool. Yeah, that was like right on the button.
Okay.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
This was really awesome.
No, I'm glad. I don't. You must get exhausted asking all these questions to people all the time.
No, actually not at all. And if anything, I realized